Hello and welcome in this tutorial on how to use the education financial model template. This specific template has been designed for a bartender school, but it can be adapted to any other education related business like culinary school, art school, certificate training programs or centers, yeah, pretty much anything education related. So let's start. The first tab that you will see down here is the color coding tab. In the color coding tab, you can see the different types of cells that you might encounter in the business model. As you can see, for example, we have the input tab, which is a yellow cell with blue font and dotted border. The input cells are the cells that you can modify and edit in order to adapt the financial template to your specific business. Then we have the hard-coded cells, which are cells where the value is hard-coded, very uncommon. For example, in this particular financial plan, there isn't no one. Then we have the output cells, which is the result of a formula. Link cells, which are cells linking to another cell in the model. And then not applicable cells are cells that you can ignore because the model is telling you, based on the inputs that you have inputted so far, no need to fill in these particular cells because you are creating some scenarios. Of course, the model can be fine-tuned to different scenarios, and when you fill in the inputs, some scenarios, of course, are no longer available, and so the model tells you not applicable. But we will see more in detail later. The next tab is the table of content tab, which gives you an overview of what you will find in the different. So for example, we have the input tabs where you will find all the input cells so that where you can basically fine tune the model to your specific business. Then we have the output tabs where you can find, for example, different metrics and charts in the dashboards tabs. You can find the 3 pro forma financial statements in the financial statements tab, so profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. You can find a valuation tab with a proxy, a theoretical valuation of your business based on the inputs that you have selected, of course. And then the calculations tab, where we calculate the revenues, the cost of goods sold, the expenses, your hiring plan, full-time employees, the capital expenditure, and the debt. And within these tabs, you will be able to see all the different components that constitute revenues, cost of goods sold, expenses, and so on. So let's start with the input tab. As you can see, every tab is divided into sections, and in order to expand a certain section, you just need to click on the plus button here. So in the general information section, for example, you can select the company name, so the name of your school. Then the financial plan start date, the fiscal year end, when your school opens. So for example, the financial plan should start in January 2024, but you only open in April, so you can insert April here. And then the currency to be used. Then we have the company specific information, so the cash starting balance with how much money you start, the corporate tax rate, and then what the unit is. Is it students? Is it members? You can select it here, and the model will adapt. Then, in the quantity of students section, you can select how many new students you get every month. So this allows you to fill in a certain seasonality. If you expect, for example, more students in summer, you can adapt it here. And then, of course, these students cumulatively create your user base. But there needs to be a limit, right? Because, of course, every school is constrained by space or by the number of teachers, for example. So you can select a maximum number of students per month that you can have, so that when you reach cumulatively this amount of students, then you won't accept new students. Then in the next cell, you can select the growth rate per annum of new students. So for example, in January of the first year, you have on average 8 new students, while on January of the second year, you will have 8 new students plus 5%. And then the next cells, this 10% allows you to basically edit how much you expect the maximum students capacity of your school to grow year by year. So it is related to this 120. So on the first year, you have a maximum capacity of 120, and then on the second year, 120 plus 10%, or of course, whatever you input here. Then we have the revenue section where you can select the different types of classes. We allow up to tiers of classes or subscription in your school. The price per month, how much this price grows per year, the customer mix. So this is basically out of 100 students that come into your school, how many choose this option, how many this option, and how many this option. And then the average lifetime. So basically, when a student gets enrolled in your school or your academy or whatever, how many months does he or she remain there before leaving, before churning? And so you can select the amount of months here, and this of course will result in a certain monthly churn rate that we will use to account for the number of students every month. Then you can have additional revenues. So for example, you can offer private classes, but you can also offer educational material, you can offer books or whatever. Or if you're a dance school, for example, you can offer, I don't know, dance shoes or something like this. So you can add those here, right? So you can add the revenue type, the share of students that every month purchase this item, the average price that they pay per month, and then how much this price should grow every year. Then we have the expenses. So you can select the different categories of expenses here. For example, kitchen maintenance. I've already mentioned that this specific financial plan has been designed for a bar school business. So kitchen maintenance, bar maintenance, and academic resources are your cost of goods sold categories. The categories that you fill in here will constitute the drop down that you can find here. So if we add, for example, you will see the test appears here as well. And the categories are important because in the financial statements, we categorize your costs based on the categories that you insert here. So you select the categories here, you select the individual expense items here. Of course, you can have multiple expense items referring to the same category. You select the start date and then how you want to calculate it, whether you want to calculate it as a share of sale or as a fixed amount. So for example, you just need to change it and then you will need to add the fixed amount. As you can see, we have not applicable cells here because the model is telling us, okay, if you select share of sales, then you need to fill in this cell. While if you select fixed amount, you need to select these two cells. And so the model will adapt based on the inputs that you give. Then you have recurring expenses. So again, you select the categories. These categories fill in the drop-down that you will find here. You select the individual expense items and then the start date. And then how you want to calculate it, right? The difference is that those are recurring expenses, so OPEX, and this is cost of goods sold. And of course, they will fall into different categories in the financial statements. Again, you can have bookkeeping, for example, the space rental, the management software, utilities, cleaning, whatever. You can select it here with a fixed amount or a share of sales and a start date. And then one-time expenses. You might have expenses that only happen one time, like initial setup fee and initial maintenance, for example. And then you select the category, again, from the list that you input here, the expense date and the expense amount. Then hiring plan allows you, again, you fill in the categories of your employees. These categories allow you to select a certain drop-down, constitute a certain drop-down. Then you select the individual, you can input the individual role with the salary, the start date, whether there is an end date. If not, and you plan to hire them indefinitely, just leave it empty. And then the employment taxation and the salary increase per annum. And then the last two sections are capital expenditure. So if you need to do to have some capital expenditure for your school, you add it here together with the depreciation schedule, so that how many years you believe the equipment that you bought here to last. And then the balance sheet, where you can select the inventories and receivables as a share of revenues and the payables as a share of COGS. The equity, if you have an investor, you can add it here together with the time so that we can account, together with the investment date so that we can account properly for the amount of money that you will receive, that the business will receive. Then the debt, so if you incur in any debt, you can add it here together with the borrowed amount, the remaining months, debt issuance date, debt repayment start date, and the interest per annum. If you already have an outstanding debt when you are filling in this financial plan, then just add the outstanding amount here. And then as debt issuance date and debt repayment start date, just use the financial plan start date that you have here. Okay, so then the next three tabs are the dashboards tab. So we have a dashboard with numbers only, with charts only, and with charts and number. So here you can find different metrics like the cumulative number of students, the additional sales per year, classes revenues, cost of goods sold, and so on. In order to expand it, you just need to click on the plus or on the 2 to expand all the categories. And so you can have a quick overview of the results of your model, of how your business is doing. Same thing, but with charts. And then same thing with charts and number for all the different metrics. And also in this particular tab, you can expand and not only see a yearly breakdown, but also a monthly breakdown by clicking on the plus button here. So by clicking on the plus button here, you can see that a new section opens and you can see month by month what is happening across the different categories. Then we have the financial statements tab, where you can see the profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. So by expanding, you can see, for example, the total classes revenues, the additional revenues, overall revenues, total cost of goods sold and gross profit, EBITDA, EBIT, and so on. You can see the balance sheet with the total assets and total liabilities and equities. You can see the cash flows, so operating cash, cash flow, investing cash flow, and financing cash flow. Then you have a valuation tab, where based on certain assumptions, we derive a weighted average cost of capital, and then we calculate the free cash flows for your business. We discount it at present value based on the weighted average cost of capital that we find here based on your inputs. And then this results in an implied valuation today. And then you can have you can see some multiples here based on revenues, EBITDA, and EBIT that are the result of your inputs. And then we have the calculations tab. So as mentioned in the calculations tab, we can expand everything. And here you can see all the different metrics, sub-metrics that contribute to create the overall revenues. So you can see the new students per month, the churning students per month, the cumulative students, the pricing for the classes, the additional revenues, and so on. Then we add everything together and we have the total revenues. Same for COGS, same for expenses with recurring and one time. Same with full-time employees, with salaries by department and number of employees, and then capital expenditure and debt with the bank debts that you have inserted and the overall debt.